Hello, this is X-Rays, where knowledge meets inspiration in the intricate dance of industry evolution. Today's episode is one of those conversations that really makes you stop and think about what actually keeps organizations strong long term. Because let's face it, businesses can invest in the latest technology, systems, and strategies. But if people stop learning, sharing knowledge, or growing together, even the best systems eventually start falling apart. And our guest here, who just recently celebrated his birthday, has spent more than 4 decades to help us understand exactly that. He has been championing total quality management, continuous professional development, future ready leadership, and people focused organizational growth long before this became popular in businesses. He's also been clear that sustained success is more than just about compliance, it's about people, knowledge, engagement, and how businesses prepare themselves for the future. So, let's go learn more once again from the Managing Director and CEO of ACI Global and e-Quip, the one and only Ian Erskine. Hi, Ian.
Welcome back, Miles, and to all your lovely guests. And I trust, as always, that not only yourself, but all our viewers have had a wonderful, wonderful weekend. I had a lovely weekend and leading into the early part of this week, celebrating my 76th birthday.
Yay.
And again with family, but again with people that I treat as family in work. And yes, and I will mention Fugan, who sent a beautiful gift over from Pakistan.
Uh-huh.
And as I said, we'll be meeting young Fugan probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks and having a bit of a chat to the what I call the troublesome word algorithms, but we'll have a talk about that in a few weeks' time
Uh-huh.
because there's been a few little developments, well, not little, fairly large developments in that area, which we will discuss. But today's going to be a wonderful podcast because it's all to do with knowledge and
Mhm.
basically how that knowledge is to be nurtured and looked after when we're talking about modern day premises, technology, infrastructure, and things like that. And we'll introduce the keyword mentoring,
Uh-huh.
and but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I guess, as I said, this is going to be an intriguing and very wonderful podcast. And basically, we're going to be concentrating on knowledge and how we nurture and manage it.
Yes, happy birthday again, Ian. Always great to have you back here on the
And
show,
thank you so
especially
much.
today. You're welcome. Especially today, we're talking about this really important topic, as you said. Let's unpack how organizational knowledge, people development, mentoring, technology, and continuous professional development, or CPD, all connect to long term business success. After more than 40 years working with organizations and their people across different industries, what have you found to be the real foundation behind long term success, quality, and continuous improvement?
Well, it's that one word, knowledge. And uh, this is the thing that is becoming quite evident now, driven by technology and again, evolution of the workplace and evolution of even ourselves and how we work within groups, within our families, within a business. And this is where we talk about knowledge. And I think when we look at knowledge, we tend to sort of walk away and stop to think, well, hold on, where is that knowledge based? And quite often people will jump in and say, oh, it's based on people's servers and things like that. And I say,
Mhm.
well, no, knowledge is based in your own brain. And that's where it is. And where I'm now coming from the point where that's where it needs to stay. That's where it needs to be nurtured, needs to be protected. So you protect people within the workplace, within their businesses, within their homes, and things like that. And you nurture and you challenge that. So when we talk about the brain and its knowledge, we're talking about cognitive and strategic thinking. Now, go back to where this series started when we were talking about policy and strategic direction. When we talk about strategic direction, that basically is being driven by not only the owner and the directors, but also all the employees, their knowledge, their strategic direction, and cognitive thinking within their brains. And that's where now I'm challenging people where, oh no, we've got our data secured, it's in the cloud, it's a reputable company and so forth. And that's where I say, well, can you guarantee without any equivocation that at any given time that can't be hacked or someone can grab that knowledge and manipulate it? And that's where you often get the look from people where they look back at you and say, well, actually, no, we can't. So that's where I'm now concentrating on people's knowledge and actually storing that within the person themselves. But that's where you have to really step back, look after your employees, nurture that intelligent and the strategic thinking of each of them, right?
Mhm.
And again, we'll talk about this a little bit later today. And in the next couple of episodes, we'll be talking about learning, personal learning, and how you actually do that on an ongoing basis within the business and you hold it within the business. Because
Mhm.
if you hold it within the business, it is fully protected.
Yeah. And when so many businesses are chasing speed and automation, sometimes they forget that knowledge still lives inside people first. Yes, tech can absolutely support a business, but experience, mentoring, and people engagement are still what hold organizations together long term. And that leads nicely, Ian, into something a lot of organizations are trying to figure out right now. We're seeing businesses invest heavily in AI, as you mentioned earlier, automation and digital systems. But where do you think the balance really sits between technology, people as the organization's most important asset, and real total quality management or TQM?
Yeah, well, following on from what we've just been talking about, it has to be based around knowledge and where that knowledge is, and it is, and you can't get away from this. It doesn't matter how much work they'll do on algorithms, how much work they'll do on AI, and how much they'll talk up. No, no, you've got to allow that to be moved from one point to another. No, it must remain within that person themselves because that in itself is unique in every way. We are all so different, it's challenging, right? And it is challenging within the workplace, and that's where
Yeah.
you've got to get that balance right. But this is what is beginning to alarm me. We seem to have this acceptance now that, AI will do it better, AI will do it quicker, and things like that, where I'm now challenging and coming back to the point, well, okay, so if you say AI can do it better, are you saying AI can improve your own brains? And that's where they stop and think, and quite more than 100% of the time, people will come back and say, no, my brain is unique. And
Uh-huh.
that's where I then challenge them and say, yes, it has to remain unique, right? Now, when we're talking about technology, this is where I am relatively alarmed, but I think we're now beginning to turn the corner because people are now saying and openly saying, what if we can limit AI to within our own data realm, right?
Mhm.
And I'm now saying, well, yeah, well, if that's the case, that's a positive because if you can stop it going out into the wide world of the web and into different and countless data centers all around the world, I think that is a huge positive. But my challenge back is I'm saying, why do we need AI? And again, that word A for artificial is very challenging for me because how dare we treat knowledge as artificial? Because that's what they're basically doing. And it's not artificial,
Yeah.
right? But
Mhm.
going back to my point, this is where the lessons we need to learn, the failures and successful outcomes we achieve personally within the business.
Yeah.
This is where we need to hold that within the business, right? Within the person themselves. And this is where the next challenge that we're now facing is we're pushing to actually have 4-day weeks. So we're allowing workers to have one day at home. Yes, they'll be working for the business, but they can work from home. Now, what I'm now concentrating on is be very, very careful because if you tend to want to extend that, right, you'll lose the mentoring between each of us. And when we talk about learning, one of the most important facets of learning is mentorship, learning from your seniors, learning from your fellow workers, that's where you learn the most, because what is the most interesting thing is where you'll start off, wow, I can learn so much from Joe, our senior manager. I'll sit down and we'll talk together. But it's the most amazing transfer of knowledge because Joe actually becomes part of that learning process back the other way, back to Joe. Joe will learn things from either yourself or myself, and he will go away at the end of the day being better for that, right?
Mhm.
So that's something that we will talk about in our next episode when we're talking about infrastructure, the impact of technology. And don't get me wrong, I'm certainly not anti-technology, right? But I am anti-transfer of people's knowledge from themselves
Mhm.
to the wide world. And that's what is happening today. And
Mhm.
it doesn't matter how strong you put the controls in place. As someone said to me the other day, Ian, there is always someone or people or organisations out there that want to hack or get to your knowledge.
Yeah.
And when we talked about getting to your knowledge, they're getting into your brain and stealing your intelligence.
Mhm.
And to me, that's where, as not only as an organisation, but as a society, that's what we have to really double down on now and say, hold on, let's keep knowledge with people.
Mhm.
People are our core focus. If we have that core focus in place, knowledge is key. The protection of that knowledge within the person themselves
Mhm.
is the most exciting part of the accelerating continuous improvement process.
Yes, very interesting point because convenience sometimes makes people forget about responsibility. A lot are moving information around very quickly today, but not enough people are asking who owns that knowledge, who protects it, and how it's being managed properly. That's probably why the Pope has stated recently that AI has to be disarmed. And since we're talking about people development, Ian, you've also spoken about CPD or continuous professional development, future ready leadership, and creating a real people focus inside organizations. So, how important is it for businesses to move beyond training for compliance and start building a culture where learning, mentoring, and people engagement become part of everyday business performance?
Actually, when we were both putting together our notes for this podcast, a little ad continually comes to my mind, and it was the mother in the kitchen watching her young son out in the courtyard, trying to perfect the ability to be able to use his rollerblade, do a jump in the air, land back on his rollerblade, and keep going. And once, twice, three times he fell, four, five, six times he fell. And it was almost at the point where mother was about to go out and just say, little Freddie, just take it easy. And then the next thing she looked and he actually mastered it.
Yeah.
He did almost a double somersault. The rollerblade was rolling over and landed back on the wheels, and he landed on the wheels, and off he went. Now, the look on his face, I will never ever forget, because he had actually mastered something that was challenging himself. So his brain was actually challenging him. Don't stop, keep going, you'll get it right. And this is what I'm saying within people. This is what we have to continue to challenge ourselves. Now, if we put it out to an algorithm, we won't do any challenging and our brains will become lazy. Now, again, this is where our PDR software comes in, because part of the competency framework is challenging that capability. Yes, sure, we can now determine that you are capable at this point of achieving your task, but
Mm-hmm.
to continually to do that, you have to continually improve. So
Yeah.
again, this comes back to mentoring. So when you're doing your one-on-one or your 360 appraisals between each other, this is where you each need to challenge each other. Well, yes, I'm doing very well in that, but how can I improve that further? Right? So that's where we're using technology to benefit this process of taking the mentoring and taking the knowledge and nurturing that knowledge between one another to challenge each other to go that next step to get that accelerating continuous improvement within the processes.
Yes.
And to do this, again, we go back to what we're saying. It is just so important to protect that knowledge, hold that knowledge within your business, right? And this is where we have to stand firm and say, no, why should my knowledge go to some database or think or something like that? And
Mm-hmm.
even to the point where that knowledge needs to be held in a person's brain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that can also become rather challenging because you might have an employee that's built their knowledge up from working within the organisation over many years, right?
Yeah.
Now, one of the benefits of doing that is that sooner or later, an employee will say to themselves, well, I actually now want to start my own business, right?
Yeah.
Now, all that knowledge that he's used has been imparted throughout the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this then becomes a challenge. When they leave, what do you say? No, you can't take that knowledge because that's been developed within house, within the organisation.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say that because that's a restrict of a person's own ability to trade their own excellent thoughts and words and deeds,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is what I'm saying to people. This is where you get the one-on-one mentorship and things like that. So you learn from each other. Now that's how you will then hold that knowledge because when he walks out, you have to have a process in place as ongoing, so it's protected that knowledge, growing that knowledge within the workforce,
Yeah.
right? So if you like, you're using their knowledge to better each other's knowledge and grow your business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that's how a business will succeed. Now, I then also challenge them and I say, well, look, how good is it where you can say yourself, well, Joe's now gone out. Wow, look at that wonderful business he started.
Mm-hmm.
And sooner or later, that message will get out to everyone that Joe came from, and I use ACI, Joe actually came from ACI Global. Wow, what a
Mm-hmm.
great organisation. They trained him, they educated him. He's now
Mm-hmm.
running his own business. His initial knowledge development and nurturing has all come from within the fostering business, right? And that will never change,
Yeah.
right? Because this
Mm-hmm.
is where, and we've talked about it before, we've talked about eternity, where you hold things into your heart and your soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our loved ones, where when they leave and go upstairs, right?
Yeah.
I always say to people, remember the fun times, remember the wonderful times that you have had together. Concentrate on that. Yes, there's grieving, that's a natural part of the process,
Mm-hmm.
but holding on to the thoughts and the successes, the good stories, that's where eternity comes from because you don't forget that. You always hold that thought, which is the soul of the other person within your soul, and you move forward. And that's where I now beginning to talk to lots of people where we talk about eternity, that ongoing togetherness and holding those thoughts and that knowledge within ourselves. And like I said, you hold that knowledge from the previous employee still in the
Mm-hmm.
business because it's been transferred across to all the other employees' brains, right? And the way they do things. And that's how you've got eternity, you've got ongoing development and professional development and accelerating continuous improvement.
Yeah. And I really like that perspective, Ian. And I find it very unfair to use others' knowledge without them knowing it, right? I mean, isn't that stealing? And Ian, I've learned ACI Global has developed tools like ACI Global 360 Professional Development Review or the PDR profile, along with ISO personal certification programs. How do tools like this help organizations identify capability gaps, protect organizational knowledge, and make both people and businesses future ready?
Well, this is a challenging one because obviously you can't step in because if someone wants to leave and start up their own business, there's a
Mm-hmm.
limit to what you can do. Yes, you desperately try and hold them in. It could be even a situation where you uh, slightly change or amend the scope of your business to cater for that person's specific idea or ideas,
Mm-hmm.
where you can take that on board within your organisation. But this is where you have to be very careful because knowledge is something that always needs to be challenged, always needs to be nurtured. And we now, particularly on ongoing and emergent technologies, we have to be aware, wow, yes, that looks a fantastic idea, but what if? What are the scenarios of the impacting on the person themselves? So that's where you've got to look at emerging technologies. You've got to look at the financial impact on your business. You've got to look at how that impacts people themselves. Now, this is where, in some respects, and I've seen this in many organisations where you've watched a person being nurtured, evolving through the business, stepping up the ladder, and you get to a point, and even this is where I've often spoken to the managing director and the owners of the business. And they're openly talking about, that Joe will soon be leaving because he wants to take that next step, right?
Yeah.
And the success of this becomes apparent when the organisation actually works with that person to make sure that transition from their business to their own business is seamless, impactless, right? And it becomes an exciting journey. And where this becomes so successful and so pleasing is when someone leaves and they start up their own business.
Yeah.
That camaraderie between the former business and the person's new business, that stays in place. And it's amazing. And I've actually seen this working in the world today where someone's left a business, they've started their own business alongside the other business, slightly different focus and so forth. But
Mhm.
both of them have been strengthened because of that process, right?
Okay.
And this is where it becomes so magnificent to watch how those two businesses grow working as collaborative partners, right?
Mhm.
And people sometimes say, how can they work together when he left that business? And I say, well, he left that business with a big smile on his face.
Mhm.
Okay. And that's where, again, going back to what were the original thoughts of this podcast, where we're talking knowledge. This is what knowledge and the thrill of accelerating continuous improvement of each and everyone's brains, our intelligence, right? This is where it becomes oh so important and so pleasing. And this is what we'll discuss in the final two sessions, where we talk about infrastructure, the impact of technology, and then we'll finish it off by talking about learning and doing internal audits and a self-assessment, right?
Mhm.
And again, just a bit of an insight when we're talking about self-assessment. That's where you actually challenge your own brain, your own working, your own processes. You challenge, well, yeah, they're doing very well, but we can actually do better. Let's consider this part of the process. It might be, well, we can introduce a small technology enhancement to put in there, right? And away you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Knowledge indeed has to be nurtured and developed, Ian. And I also like that you've been bringing up mentoring here because while remote work and technology definitely bring flexibility, there's still something valuable about human interaction, shared learning, and employee bonding that organizations cannot afford to lose completely. And finally, with technology evolving so fast and industries are constantly changing, what should organizations should be doing right now to make sure their people, their systems and leadership teams stay adaptable, maintain compliance through conformance, and become truly ready for long-term ACI Global certification and ISO certified success?
Well, I think the most important thing is remain focused on people. If we remain focused on people, it will give us the strength and put us in a strong position to be able to combat what is happening now. And what is happening now, we've got this, it's all like a maniac race to embrace what they call AI. And again, what does artificial mean? It's not artificial in any way, shape, or form. But again, to me, We have to be able to embrace technology, but not at the expense of people. That's the most important thing. If we remember the people focus and the joy, again, the joy of someone being able to achieve a task after repeated failures, as the young child on the skateboard doing a loop and a hoop and landing back on the board and away he goes, that's what the ever-ending challenge should be, challenging people themselves to think outside the box, think more, think big, challenge yourself. And that's where you'll get the combined strategic thinking of all the businesses people with the business owners and the directors, and the business will become stronger, more exciting, and more exciting for people to mentor between themselves so that we can actually protect our own intelligence.
Hmm. Focusing on people is key. And let me repeat what you said because I really like it. Embracing tech, but not at the expense of people. That's a really strong reminder that becoming future ready isn't something that needs to be done only once and forget about it. It's really an ongoing process of learning, adapting, improving, and making sure both people and technology continue moving in the right direction together. So, thank you so much again, Ian, for your very practical perspective on total quality management, people engagement, mentoring technology, ISO personal certification, and what organizations need to do today to stay future ready. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much again, Miles, and you're a true champion. And again, well done.
Thank you. Okay, to all of you who would like to learn more, we left the links below for you to easily access ACI Global and e-Quip and a lot of valuable information for organizations looking to strengthen people capability, compliance through conformance, leadership development, and long-term organizational quality. You better keep your eyes open for this episode on their website as well, aciglobal.com.au, so you can revisit and share this conversation anytime. Until next episode with Ian Erskine, this has been your host Miles. Stay focused, driven, and inspired with X-Rays.